Welcome to the Women Leaders Association podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. Be sure to tune in each week to hear an empowering message from the world's top women executives, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, and all-around fierce female leaders. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland, and I will be taking you on a deep dive of each message to equip you with the principles, strategies, and tools you need to start crushing your goals, increasing your impact, creating work-life harmony, and did I mention have more fun? Because when you love what you do it better. The Women Leaders Association is the world's largest women executives association with over 30,000 women in executive and leadership positions who are committed to the development and advancement of women in the corporate arena. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association chapter, would enjoy daily podcasts, or you desire to become a part of the Women's Mastermind group near you, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com. Now let's tune in for this incredible message. Kim K.C. Campbell is a retired Air Force colonel who served in the Air Force for over 24 years as a fighter pilot and senior military leader. She served as a group commander responsible for 1,000 military and civilian personnel and finished her career as the director of the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. She flew more than 100 combat missions and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for Heroism after successfully recovering her battle-damaged airplane from an intense close air support mission. Since retiring from the Air Force, Kim has shared her inspirational story and lessons on leading with courage with business and corporate audiences around the world as an executive coach and keynote speaker. We are so excited to welcome Kim. We are so excited to have Kim with us today. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I am so excited you're here. And thank you for being so gracious. So we actually recorded a podcast last week and Zoom didn't keep the recording.
It was a good one too.
It was so good. It was so good. I know. And I was thinking like, okay, can I retell all her stories if she can't re-record? Because it was so rich and it was so deep. And I think you have such a strong voice for women leadership, not only in your area of expertise, but just in general that women need to hear. So thank you again for your time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. Talk about how you got involved in the Air Force in the beginning.
Yeah, it started a long time ago. For me, it started when I was 10 years old. I was watching the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And I remember being so excited with the launch and it was something that was new to me. I was really excited. And then watching the devastation play out kind of in front of me, there was something in that moment that I connected with, this idea that these astronauts died doing something that they believed in, something that was big and important and bigger than themselves. And I realized that there was something in that I wanted. And I decided at 10 years old that I wanted to be an astronaut. And after talking to my parents, decided that the way to get there was to go to the Air Force Academy, become a fighter pilot, and then eventually maybe go on to the astronaut program.
And so you never did go to the astronaut program. So talk about how did that journey end up rolling out for you?
Yeah, well, I realized that I loved being a fighter pilot. I love flying the A-10 and supporting our troops on the ground. It was a passion and really I felt a sense of purpose in that, and I wasn't ready to give that up. And I will tell you the other piece of this was by then, by the time that it would have made sense for me to kind of transition to that route, I had gotten married and was ready to have kids. And all of a sudden, priorities kind of change and shift. And even though it had been my goal and my dream for so long, I realized that my priorities had shifted a bit and I was ready to kind of take a different path.
Yeah. So what was it like for you as a woman going into the Air Force when you did? What was the current culture like at that time?
Well, when I went to the Air Force Academy, we were at about 16% women. The Air Force Academy was roughly around 30% women right now. So I started my journey in this kind of male-dominated environment early on. I realized very quickly that the way to excel really for me was to be prepared, to go in very credible, very capable, especially in the athletic kind of arena, because that's one of the first ways that you can kind of demonstrate that you're capable and credible is to be able to kind of keep up and hang with everybody else. And then as a fighter pilot, walking into my squadron on day one, I knew I was going to be the only female fighter pilot. At the time in the Air Force, we had about 35 female fighter pilots out of about 3,500. So there were very few of us. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. I felt like if I made a mistake or if I failed, that I would ruin it for the women that followed me. No one said that to me, but that's how I felt. That's the pressure that I put on myself. Yeah. And what I realized over time was that really every young wingman that comes into a squadron, a new pilot, is going to be judged and evaluated. I mean, that's just the way it is. Everybody's kind of looking to see how you'll respond. For me, that pressure in some ways was a good thing because it meant that I worked really hard. I put in a lot of effort, a lot of extra hours because I wanted to be credible. And over time, I realized that, that credibility really mattered and that the guys in my squadron didn't really care about my gender. They just cared that I was credible and capable in the airplane. And so as soon as I proved that, I really was accepted into the squadron. I mean, the jet doesn't care about the difference, right? So I realized the pilots didn't either. So, I really looked at those guys as my brothers and I would do anything for them. And I know they felt the same way about me.
Yeah. So talk about your first mission when you first went out. So that's an incredible story.
Yeah, one of my very first missions in combat, I spent a couple months in my unit and then we deployed very quickly to Afghanistan and then turned around very quickly and deployed to Iraq to support Operation Iraqi Freedom. And on one of those missions, by the time our ground troops had gotten to Baghdad, the situation on the ground was very intense. It was really just getting worse. And so they just had aircraft just stacked up around Baghdad to provide support and to save lives. And we were in the stack for just a few minutes and we got this frantic call over the radio saying our ground troops were taking fire. We needed immediate assistance. And we just were going to do everything that we could. We were going to take some risks to be able to support our troops in the ground. And as I was coming off target on my last pass is when I felt and heard this huge explosion at the back of the airplane. And I knew immediately I was hit. There was no doubt in my mind. I mean, the jet nosed over. I could see Baghdad below. I instinctively just pulled back on the control stick and absolutely nothing happened. And I looked out at my ejection handles thinking, that's the last thing I want to do, really. And so I knew I had to make every second count. I quickly tried to analyze, figure out what was going on. Keep in mind, my airplane's out of control. I'm just trying to do these things very quickly. It almost felt like time slowed down, but was able to figure out that all of the hydraulics on my airplane, which is how we fly the airplane, it's how we control our control surfaces, and they were at zero. It was completely depleted. And my only option at this point, other than ejecting, was to put the jet in our emergency backup system. And thankfully flipped the switch and the airplane slowly started to climb out and away from Baghdad. And for me, that was one of the first moments I was like, I think I might actually survive this.
Wow. That's so incredible. So what was going through your mind except for okay, how did those protocols kick in? What was that like?
Well, I think in many ways, my training kicked in. It was just muscle memory of what to do because we had put in so much practice and preparation for these missions. We planned for these contingencies. I mean, we talked about what happens if you get hit in our briefing. I mean, it's just one of the things that we talk about. I personally had thought about kind of that worst case scenario and what I would do. And so I do feel like I was able to revert back to my training. But I think that other thing is just in that moment when you're feeling overwhelmed. For me, I didn't think I was scared when this happened. I was just I didn't even have time to think about it. I wasn't scared. And then I went back and watched the video and listened to the audio, and I can hear the fear in my voice when it happens. I can tell that I am afraid, but I have to take action, right? There's nobody else that's going to do it for me. This is a single seat airplane. And, I'm just thankful that my training kicked in, that all that preparation, all that hard work, all the hard things, quite honestly, that I had done leading up to this in my life, I really think prepared me for that one moment where everything had to come together. I had to remain calm and really just focus on what was most important, which was getting my airplane back under control.
Man, and that's such a great mirror to just life in general. The things that we do today, right? The thoughts that we think today, the words that we speak, the actions that we take, that is what is building into our future. And there are going to be times where we want somebody to come help us. We want somebody to come save us. We want somebody to come, relieve us. And that person's not coming. And so it's like, have you been doing the things to grow yourself, to expand your capacity to be able to hold, the future that you desire to have? And so as you now have helped, you've gone back to the Air Force Academy as a teacher, right? So talk a little bit about what you are very intentional in helping these students grow with.
Well, I think it's really important to be able to share stories and lessons learned from our experiences. And for me, I realized that in that moment over Baghdad, the stories from other pilots were fresh in my mind. And I realized that their courage in sharing those stories, their vulnerability in sharing those stories and the lessons learned was so critical. And so for me, to be able to go back to the Air Force Academy, to be an instructor, to be the director of the Center for Character and Leadership Development, I mean, it was kind of a dream job where for me, it was an opportunity to give back and to share some of those stories and lessons and to talk about how it's so important to, pay attention, to put in the work, because you never know when that moment is going to be for you. It may not be a life and death situation over Baghdad, but it could be a moment where you feel fear or worried or stressed about something. And are you prepared in that moment to take action? Are you prepared when things are going wrong and when you feel that fear, can you take action anyway? It's this idea of being brave and afraid at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think there are many situations in our everyday lives where we're going to feel that fear, whether it's fear of not meeting expectations, fear of change, fear of the unknown. All of those moments can feel overwhelming or daunting or stressful. And so it's all about what you do in that moment. Have you put in the work so that in that moment you are prepared to take action?
Yeah, that's so good. And I love just the everyday analogy, right? It doesn't have to be bombs over Baghdad. It's what we're naturally facing. And I think what so many women are facing right now in leadership is really stepping into who they are, their authentic voice, and not being afraid to step in that truth and stand in that truth and be vocal about it. There is this undercurrent fear of, oh, but if I say this, I'm going to get canceled. And if I say this, I'm going to get canceled by this side. And there's this, we're afraid to show up because of what other people's expectations, like you said, are.
Yeah.
And so what has helped you and to show up authentically, and what's helped grow that in you?
Well, I mean, I would say that I felt very much the same way, in the early days of my career. It was this idea that I was worried about being authentic and true to who I was. I mean, I really could identify with, this combat proven fighter pilot and having this tough exterior. I mean, I felt like that's what leaders were supposed to be. And I will tell you that I learned very quickly that's not what my team wanted. My team wanted me to be authentic and true to who I was, right? To show that human side of leadership.
Yeah.
And for me, that lesson actually came from my 3-year-old son. And one of the things that happens when we get selected for command is there's a very formal change of command ceremony. And mine was in an aircraft hangar out on the flight line, clean, shiny airplane behind me. And the hangar was full of guests from friends and family, and then local community and base officials. And my husband and my 3-year-old son were there, and they were sitting in the front row. But about 15 minutes into this ceremony, my new boss, he's giving this speech about the importance of leadership and having a good leader. And I look down at my son and, give him a quick little smile. And I look at him and I can just tell he is bored out of his mind. Like he wants nothing to do with this ceremony, doesn't want to be there. And, so I kind of give him a smile and a nod. And then he just decides to stand up and he takes a few steps. And I'm kind of thinking what are you doing? Where are we going here? And he takes a few more steps. And now my husband and I are doing the silent communication thing where I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and I'm thinking, you should probably go do something because, this is a formal military ceremony. And my husband is looking at me thinking, I'm not doing anything because we could have a full-blown meltdown, like right here in front of everybody. My son doesn't care about any of this. He takes a few more steps, and he is moving very slowly. Like if he moves slowly enough, he is invisible. Nobody sees him, but I see him and my husband sees him. And now like he's taken enough steps and he's gotten away from the seats enough that everybody else sees him too. And my mind is just racing. Like I am thinking, I am supposed to take command of 150 people, 150 military and civilian personnel, and I cannot control my 3-year-old son. Like that is what's going through my mind. I'm worried about what my team is thinking about me. My son takes a few more steps and he finally is now like next to the stage. And I think he's just going to maybe sit on the stairs and kind of watch from there. Eventually he's like, no, he climbs up a few more steps and then he's up right in my lap.
I love it.
And my mind is like racing now. Like my adrenaline's pumping. I'm nervous. I'm like, what is my team thinking of me? And then I just look down at my son and he's just totally content. He's sitting there as happy as can be. He's got like these shorts on and red Cars Crocs, and he's got this big old scrape on his shin because he's 3. And that's what he chose to wear to the ceremony.
Of course.
And he's content. You know, he's just happy to be there. And I realized kind of in this moment, looking down at him, I'm like, well, here I am, right?
Yeah.
Like I am a mom, I'm a fighter pilot, I'm a wife, I'm a leader, I am all of these things. Like this is me, you know, it's just kind of almost relinquishing some of that control of what I thought a leader should be. And, you know, I was still nervous about what my team was thinking, but in the days after this ceremony, as I spent time just walking around and talking to my team and kind of getting to know them, the one thing that came up in every conversation was my son getting up in my lap, because it was like, it made me human, right? It connected me with them.
Yeah.
And in a way that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. It just was a reminder to me that, you know, my young airmen taught me a lesson too, right? It's that we can earn trust and create connections by showing this human side of leadership and being authentic and true to who we are.
Yeah. And that willingness to be vulnerable. I mean, you really could have like voiced to your husband, like, do something now. And, you know, and you didn't, and you allowed for that moment to take place. And like you said, it allowed you to connect on a deeper level with your airmen that you are going to be now in charge of. And it's so cool because in your mind, you're sitting there on the stage thinking, oh, what are they thinking that I'm not going to be able to control, and I'm not going to be able to do this. And I'm not, like, we always go to lack, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, it made you an even stronger leader in their eyes. And that is so cool to me. And I think that's what so many women in leadership are missing, is that willingness, that courage to be vulnerable and to be fully authentic and to say, you know what? Yeah, I am a mom. I am a boss. I am a leader. I am a whatever. It's all of me. You get all of me. And that's so beautiful that you got to experience that.
Yeah. You know, and you're right. I mean, it does take courage to show that human side. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And sometimes we think about it as, well, if we're vulnerable and we show too much, then it makes us weak. I think it's a strength, right? It is allowing people to see all the sides of us, letting people in. Like, we have a lot of the same challenges. You know, we might be a leader in an organization, wherever a position is, everyone has their own unique challenges and things that they're dealing with. And why not let people know that you are not, you know, you're not perfect, right? You don't have all the answers. Like, you have your own challenges. That's okay. I think it connects us. It creates those connections. And then once you have those connections and you have that trust, I think we're now in an environment where we can do so many more things, right? It allows us to be, you know, authentic and true to who we are, but it also creates trust where we can now have these hard conversations. We feel more comfortable dealing with change and uncertainty because we have this trust with each other.
Yeah, that's so good. To be able to trust somebody who's leading you is so important, you know, and I think as the leaders, we're often thinking the other side, like, oh, we need to be seen as authoritative and all of this, but really, to have the trust of your team, that is hugely important. I mean, you can move mountains with people that align to your vision and that, you know, trust you with their livelihood, with what they're experiencing. And I think that's an incredible just way to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when I look back over the course of my career now, I realize that that moment of just being, showing a different side of me created trust. And sometimes we feel like, well, I'm not going to trust them unless they trust me. But as a leader, like, it's you, right?
Yep.
You got to jump in first.
Yeah.
You got to show that trust if you're going to earn
Yes,
it. And
absolutely.
it's uncomfortable and it can be scary and it can feel just, awkward at times, but I really believe in it. I have seen it. I've seen it work. And, this was with a team of 150 people, but later on, I got the experience to lead a team of more than 1,000 people. And that was, I will tell you, it's much harder to do on that scale,
Sure.
but there's nothing stopping you from getting out of the office and just walking around and talking to people and getting to know them and find out where they struggle, find out what they value. What can you do to help? I mean, it spreads, and that trust and connection, I think, is way more important, right, than that tough exterior. The credibility is important for sure, but it doesn't mean we always have to have all the answers, right? We can ask our team for ideas, and that creates trust as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so much wisdom in different perspectives and different avenues. And I think that is a strength of leaders, to be able to glean that from others. It's not, no, you don't have to have all the answers. You have to have the willingness to say, I don't have all the answers. Let's, collectively come up with the answer. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Absolutely.
You wrote a book.
Yes.
What about your book?
Yes, I wrote a book, and it's called Flying in the Face of Fear, A Fighter Pilot's Lessons on Leading with Courage. It was a super exciting process, and just to put it out there, and you never really know how your book is going to resonate with people. Like, you have in your mind a way that you want it to be and how you want it to connect with people. For me, this was all about sharing the most important stories and lessons that I learned throughout my career, and hopefully in a way that would connect with people and resonate with people to help them develop and learn and grow.
Yeah.
So it's been really exciting to have it out in the world and to have people reach out and connect with me and talk to me about the lessons that they're now sharing with their teams because of reading the book.
That is so cool. And what are some of the responses? What are some of the things that people are saying about it?
Well, I think it's, it is, I think when sometimes we're all afraid, right, to say that we feel fear, that we have doubts or uncertainty. And so the one thing that I've heard is that, thank you kind of for giving me permission that it is okay to be afraid or worried or stressed or anxious about this new role or this new challenge. And because many times we're excited as well, but there's this other side. And, it's just a reminder to everybody that those feelings, and sometimes that feeling of overwhelm that can come up, it's normal. And sometimes it's actually necessary to help us to put in the work to prepare. But it is all about what we do in those moments. It is this idea that we need courageous leaders, that we can be afraid and brave at the same time. And it's really about what we do in those moments that matters.
Oh, that's so good. And, just to bring it home to today, we got on this call and Kim's like, thank you, because we needed to move it out 10 minutes because, you had a snowstorm last night and the kids are now at school or had to stay home from school. And so, like, there are things in life that are going to come up that, is unexpected, that is unplanned for. And I think when you continue to grow yourself and to give yourself grace and to trust yourself enough to make decisions on the fly, people can use that in every single area of their life.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
It just doesn't always go as planned. That's the thing, right? We have this plan of how we want things to be. And we, sometimes I will tell you, like, I can have my day scripted and it erupts, and, you just sometimes have to roll with it. And then, like you said, you give yourself a little bit of grace. Like, it doesn't always go the way we want it to, but can we adapt? Can we adjust? Can we overcome in those moments?
Yeah. So what is one piece of advice or inspiration that you would give to the woman right now who is kind of stepping into a new position of leadership, maybe for the first time? Maybe it's a higher form of leadership. Maybe it's over a bigger group this time. What would you tell that woman?
Well, a couple things, but I know you said one piece of advice. I mean, I think really, we talked about some of it in terms of the importance of creating connections and building trust on a team. I think that's so important. But the other thing that I tell young leaders, I think it's sometimes we have this idea that we're always going to get it right, that we want to be perfect. And the truth is you're not going to be perfect, right?
So
You are going to make mistakes.
Yes.
You might even have some failures on your leadership journey, and it is okay. Like, give yourself that grace, but you've got to learn from them. So, when you get knocked down, when you make those mistakes, when you have failures on your team, it's so important to like, now what do you do, right? You've got to be able to have the methods in place that you can learn from those mistakes and failures and then get back up again, right? Learn from the mistake, figure out what caused it. Don't do it again, learn those lessons and just figure out a different path and way forward. So it's just, a little bit of a reminder to give yourself some grace. Don't be so hard on yourself, because it's leadership is a journey. There are ups, there are downs, there are challenges, there are successes, but it is also incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. And that's so important to like just grasp that, because there are going to be things that you are going to fail at, and it is a part of the process. But to keep yourself stuck in like shame and, oh, I did this wrong, and all of those negative feelings, that's not helping anybody. That's not helping you. That's not helping your team. That's not helping anybody move forward. And so again, give yourself that grace and to really look into, okay, what can I learn from this situation? And that's so powerful. That's such great advice for anybody that has.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, right? Like, there are people out there who have been there, done it, whether it's a mentor or a coach, we don't have to do this on our own. Sometimes that's the other thing. We put so much pressure on ourselves to kind of do it alone and on our own. And the truth is there's a lot of people willing to help and provide advice or assistance, and just, seek out people who have done it, listen to their stories. But remember, it is just advice. It is just their perspective. And in the end, as a leader, you are the one that has to make the decision. You are the one that has to figure out that path forward.
Yeah. Did you have somebody that modeled that for you as a female leader, or perhaps just a male leader that supported you and encouraged you in your journey?
Yeah, I think throughout my time in the Air Force and throughout the many different jobs that I've held, I've had leaders that I've looked up to that I've been able to go and ask advice. I mean, multiple times where I felt a little outside my comfort zone in terms of the new role or something that was being asked of me, where I had doubts. And I would go to people who had been there and done it and ask them their experiences, what they learned. But I also went to my senior leaders and asked their advice, their thoughts, and, asked for feedback as well on how they thought I was doing. And that was incredibly valuable for me. Even if you don't have a specific mentor in your life, you can still reach out to people and ask those questions and ask for advice when you need it, which is the kind of the path that I took.
Yeah, that's so good. I just had my son's swim banquet, his like club season swimming where he swims year round. But in every category, like every age group, the most improved, how those swimmers stood out to the coaches was they were always the ones asking, how can I improve? What piece of advice, what piece of feedback do you have for me? Like, they were seeking that knowledge to grow and understand and apply, and taking that into everyday life, and how important that is, that if we just seek to understand, and what we do with that understanding is really where we're going to get the results, right? Is that applying what we've learned. And that's so powerful. And I love how you were then able to turn around and pay that forward with all the people coming up in the academy after you. That's cool.
Yeah, I was just at the Air Force Academy yesterday talking with cadets, and we were going through a lot of these things because many of them are getting ready to take on new leadership roles, and they're excited, but they're nervous, and I think that's, the important thing as leaders, to get feedback, to, as you said, seek out feedback, not just followers in an organization, but leaders as well. And I think it's even harder for leaders because oftentimes we say, hey, if you have any feedback for me, let me know.
Right.
And people are a little bit hesitant to do that. But can you walk around and go talk to people and kind of get that feedback? How do you think things are going? do you have, a few things that you might do differently? Just in more of that casual conversation, sometimes it can come up, but I think it's important that we do seek out that feedback. We get feedback from our superiors, our peers, but also our subordinates as well.
Oh, that's so good. This conversation is so rich. Cam, I want to respect your time. Thank you so much again for coming back and re-recording. It's totally recorded this time. I'm seeing the little blinking arrow. We're all good.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to redo it.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you, Kim. And we will be sure to link your book in the show notes so y'all can grab a copy. It is a phenomenal book. It's a phenomenal message. And I know it will serve you well. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today, my friends. Be sure to give us a 5-star rate and review and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're looking for more connection, more resources, be sure to check out womenleaderspodcast.com and see how you can get involved with the Women Leaders Association chapter nearest you. Bye for now.